Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Fourth Place Trophy podcast. I'm Threkstari, and today we will be looking at the Liverpool versus Manchester United derby that happened during the weekend. I will be joined by Zilch.
Hi.
By 13goals.
Alright.
And last but not least, Magneto.
Yellow.
Alright, so let's get started. What were you guys' opinion about the match, and what would you rate it out of 5? Just in a couple of sentences. Zilch.
Generous 2 out of 5. This game normally brings up a lot better contest than that. It was 30 minutes of Liverpool pressure, and then after that, after all the arguments, they just kind of switched off, and yeah, it just disintegrated.
How about you, 13goals? What did you think?
I'll give it a 1. It was so goddamn boring after 10 minutes. I mean, Liverpool were just trying to counter, and they couldn't because the Man United defence was just so fast. It was really just a shambles.
How about you, Magneto?
Yeah, I'd give it a 2 out of 5 as well. Basic reason is that it just didn't feel like a derby. It felt like any other EPL game.
Yeah, it didn't deliver.
That's not good enough for a Liverpool versus Man United derby.
Good points. So, what do you think? What is the reason that it didn't really feel like a derby? Do you think there are certain issues in the lineup? Zilch?
Me again, no worries. No, most of the lineup was pretty much what you'd expect. Rooney was out with an injury from training, and they sorely missed him. I suppose you have to question why Kagawa wasn't included. They clearly lacked something in creativity up front. But the rest of them, I mean, they had Giggs and Young on the wings, who were both pretty ineffective, especially in their crossing. The rest of the lineup is pretty much what you'd expect. And then on the side of Liverpool, I think the only real interesting one was Aspaz starting, who really looked like a minnow in a big pond. He was so out of his depth. The rest of their lineup was pretty much what you would expect to see.
Do you have anything to add to that, Magneto?
I guess I just want to question if it is really worth it anymore to have the whole, we have experienced players for Liverpool, for United, where people like Giggs especially and even Ferdinand had really poor games. Would they have been better served with some younger and fresher players who would have taken the game a bit more seriously, I guess? I'm not really sure.
Alright, 13goals, do you have anything to add?
Well, the Man United, kind of like their lineup was pretty bog standard. It's pretty much what you expect. I have heard from a bunch of like Man United fans that Kagawa was not match fit. That's why he wasn't on the bench for them in the derby. Maddie's point about Giggs, I suppose they should maybe have kind of left him out, but then Young wasn't any much better. He couldn't hit the side of a fucking barn door.
Yeah, but they could have started Valencia.
Yeah, but Valencia is the better option than Giggs, though. But I suppose Giggs has so much goodwill with the Man United hierarchy and the Man United manager that he'd be able to start whatever game he likes.
Well, he's good, no question. He's just getting old, and he's looked a bit off the pace.
Yeah, but Giggs does have that kind of ability to shock you about what he can do.
Yeah, he does tend to wind back the years.
Yeah, he did shock me in this game, and that's not in a good way.
Oh,
his crossing shocked me a lot.
Yeah.
You see Ashley Young as well.
Oh, well.
Yeah, that wasn't any much better either.
Walcott's.
I think, to be honest, we're kind of used to Ashley Young's crossing. It's not the greatest. I think most United fans would agree with that.
He's better at cutting inside.
Giggs is normally a lot better with his crossing.
Alright, but let's look at the general pattern of the game and how it panned out during the 90 minutes. What did you think, Zilch?
Well, as I said with the rating, the start of the game was great. Liverpool did a great job of pressing as a team. They put pressure on the United midfield and they won the ball high up the pitch, which allowed them to create early chances, which is why they scored in the first, 3 or 4 minutes. So, for me, the first 30 minutes with Liverpool really piling on the pressure and United resisting it was an awesome contest to watch. But after that, there was a influxion of yellow cards where some nasty challenges came flying in. There was a bit of an argument between Gerrard and Van Persie. And after that, both teams looked a bit rattled. I don't know which team started that or why, but it just kind of destroyed the rhythm of the game. And after that, Liverpool looked like they just sat back. Gerrard didn't push forward as much, and they basically just invited United to keep the ball in midfield. And what we saw was about 15 minutes of United pressure sustained, and just Liverpool's back four doing a fantastic job of keeping them out. And, United didn't do themselves any favours. They just basically failed to break it down. With their attacking in the centre, they just had no impetus whatsoever. Van Persie was standing up front, double marked by Agger and Skirtle, and Welbeck wasn't really moving too much to make space for him. And then you had those ineffective crosses from Giggs and Young. I mean, when you look at United, you normally think good wingers, good crossing if you look over the years, and that just was not evident at all. As I said, they missed Rooney in the centre, but for me, the crossing was abysmal, and that was a huge factor.
You briefly touched on Liverpool's back four being great. What about the defensive shape of Liverpool in general? How did you find that?
Lever, am I saying it right? Lever, he stayed back and was a really effective shield for the back four. Glenn Johnson also roved a bit. He was coming around and sort of acting as a centre-back occasionally and making last-ditch effort tackles and things like that, which was really effective. Gerrard, for the first 30 minutes, he was the one piling pressure on the United midfield along with Coutinho and Sturridge, mainly Sturridge, and that was how they were winning the ball up front. But after that argument, Gerrard kind of dropped back and became sort of a midfield destroyer. He actually did a very effective job of keeping Cleverley quiet for long periods of the match, which again might have, stopped United from attacking as much. But really, looking at United, both their midfielders pretty much stayed back for the majority of the game and didn't really join in the attack. So as far as Liverpool's defensive shape is concerned, they didn't actually have to do that much in order to stay in good shape. The United didn't make it difficult for them.
Do you have anything to add to that 13 goals?
No, Zilch really kind of explained it well and kept his tactical advice in there. He did mention Gerrard dropping back a lot more to help out Agger and Skirtle and Lucas. He did very well, and special mentions do go to Jose Enrique and Glenn Johnson, who really put pressure on the Man United players to cross very, very early and very wayward.
Can I just say, Gerrard had 3 out of 4 successful tackles for a guy who normally acts as almost like a attacking mid. That's pretty impressive.
Definitely. How about you, Magneto?
One thing that hasn't been mentioned is take a look at the images provided here. You can see where Enrique and Johnson have been standing in this game, and the reason they have been able to play so higher up is because both Young and Giggs failed to actually go in behind them. At no point in the game, if you take a look at the heat maps of the whole United's performance, there was never a scenario where they actually managed to get behind them. Especially Johnson, he just was happy to stay up front because nobody could go behind them. It was really poor play, even from the wings, especially, and that really shows quite a bit of a story over here.
Yeah, that's very true. If you have a look at the United heat maps, actually, Evra, in particular, was quite industrious, and it kind of suggests that the wingers didn't really do enough, doesn't it?
Yep, most certainly. So let's jump to the only goal and analyzing it. What do you think went wrong there? Magneto, you go first.
The first point of contact is when the corner comes in, the corner is met up with Daniel Agger, and the person covering Agger over there is actually Ferdinand. Now, Ferdinand is a centre-back. He is covering another centre-back. He knows he's one of the most experienced defenders of the game. He actually made some real schoolboy errors with regards to his positioning. He let Agger be a lot further away from him, and then he was still on the right side of Agger, but then as the game moved forward, Agger actually went around him and managed to get enough time to head the ball towards goal. And even though Ferdinand was still on the right side of the game, he, instead of getting a header against Agger and just, pushing him away a little bit, using his strength, he tries to kick the ball instead of actually using his body. So what's Ferdinand doing there? The first point of contact is ball should never have come in towards goal, and Ferdinand really messed up there.
Yep.
It's like the next part, I think it's comical. The very fact that there were two defenders on the line, and Sturridge managed to go in behind the keeper, and then in between both the defenders, come out still onside, mind you, and then head the ball between them both. It's just unbelievable. Moyes is a defensive coach. He is a good coach with defensive shapes. The fact that I don't know how this was a diabolical error. It really was.
Many people are looking at Cleverly and saying he should have done better. Do you agree with that statement?
Oh yeah, certainly. If you take a look at Cleverly's position, if he just stepped one step forward, he would have made sure that Sturridge was offside. Because it would be one defender, he would be one defender. Sturridge would be one defender behind too much. So it's really just a statement of saying, I'm taking one step forward. He wasn't aware of where Sturridge was, which he should have been doing. And Vidic as well. He went and moved in towards the path of De Gea. So it's kind of like complete mishap from the defensive line. All the three people who were supposed to be a part of that defense really messed up completely.
Do you have anything to add to that, Zilch?
Yeah, well, I agree completely about Ferdinand not tracking Agger properly. I think more the schoolboy error for Cleverly is that not so much not putting him offside, but the fact that he just allowed him to get 3 or 4 yards away from him for a free header from inside the 6-yard box. That is a criminal mistake from a player who should know a lot better. And to be honest, we're used to seeing a lot better than that from Manchester United.
Definitely. How about you, 13goals? What did you make of this complete mishap of a goal?
Well, it still had a huge element of luck to it when it kind of cannoned off Sturridge's head, but didn't have that much force, and he somehow managed. It was almost like he was ducking out the way, and it just kind of grazed off his head.
No, it was a flick on. It was a flick on. It was very deliberate. It was a flick on. He knew what he was doing. He's lucky that it went between the two defenders, but it was a definite flick on.
All right, I'll take your word for it.
Well,
why don't you guys agree to disagree on this one?
You can do that, but I mean, all you have to look is the fact that Sturridge looked behind him as he headed it. So you don't do that if you didn't mean to.
Yeah, but he had to direct.
Oh yeah.
I kind of agree that it's kind of between both of them. He couldn't have pulled it out without an element of luck. Because frankly, there were two defenders and a keeper, and the fact that it went, it found enough space to go in between all of them. It just there was an element of luck, certainly. But it was a well executed free kick as well. Credit to Liverpool, they pulled it out of the training ground. It's not a fluke that in a sense that it wasn't planned at all and it just happened by luck. Yeah, they wanted that and they attempted for it and they pulled it off.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing. Agger's movement shows that.
All right. With that in mind, let's swiftly move on to substitutions and injuries and how they impacted the game. So, let's start off with 13goals this time.
Well, I mean, they already had Raphael out, and they were having to do with the makeshift right back in Phil Jones, he's not really a right back, like he's never really been trained in that position, so it must have been weird and hard for Ferdinand and Vidic to try move him into the position that he actually needed to be. And when he got injured, they have like no right back at all. It just must have been Leicester must have had a bunch of disarray in the defence.
What did you make of Valencia's performance, though? He came on as a sub for Jones.
Oh, he did fantastic. Probably one of the better players on the pitch. He came on, and then Sterling came on for Liverpool, and fucking Valencia ran rings around him for like 40 minutes.
Yep. What did you make of it, Zilch?
Well, okay. There are several key subs in that one. Firstly, I think Jones getting injured. The fact that they had to bring Valencia on at right back now, Valencia's played right back before, he's very good. And he absolutely monstered Sterling. But the problem was, Giggs up front, when he was subbed, Nani came on. And honestly, I think Valencia would have been more effective as a sub for either Giggs or the really crappy Ashley Young. Because, honestly, they basically got rid of their attacking options for later in the match. With Rooney out, Kagawa not on the bench, they had no one to bring on that could change the match up front. And it shows, if you look at Valencia's heat map, he did so much running. He absolutely bossed Sterling physically, and yet he managed to get up the wing so many times to attack. And I think if he'd been in the winger position on either left or right, I think he could have maybe instigated something for United late in the match. So for me, that was very key. I also think Young should have been subbed a lot sooner, but again, there wasn't really many options to bring on. Hernandez for Welbeck I thought would have been a better option, but that's just me. On Liverpool's side, the Johnson sub was nothing. That was just late in the game. But Coutinho coming off because he wasn't doing that well. Sterling came on and was totally ineffective. And I think the key sub for Liverpool really was Aspas finally coming off the match. I watched him just look up to the heavens as if to say, thank God for that. And Alberto coming on, who basically just consolidated for Liverpool. They calmed the game down where just when United looked a little bit dangerous and maybe would have snapped a goal, Van Persie had a close chance. And I think that bringing on Alberto just calmed the game down for Liverpool, and from there on they didn't really look like they were going to lose or concede that one goal.
What about you, Magneto? What did you think of the substitutions made during the game?
Yeah, I completely agree with Zilch with regards to Aspas. He really had a terrible game. He was definitely one of the worst players on the pitch. In all the time that he was there on the pitch, he had only 12 successful passes. It just is a complete reflection of him unable to assert himself on the game at all. He just couldn't get into good spaces, and even when he did get into good spaces, his touch left him down completely. And he just looked like he was completely out of depth over there. It felt like, I don't know, it is one scenario where I feel like Liverpool just couldn't wish that Suarez comes back soon enough. Even though they are doing really well without Suarez, Aspas wasn't convincing at all. Maybe it is because he's playing out of position, maybe. That might be a scenario. But even Sturridge, he didn't have all that, he had good movement, off the ball movement, but his passing was, again, off. He didn't have all that many passes. He had only 13 passes. So, there wasn't any real movement off the ball from the forward line. So, the balls reached the midfield. They did set back, but the forwards didn't really help upbuild the play as such. That is certainly something to look out for Liverpool in the future.
So I think it's also a reflection on how ineffective United was for once, on the fact that with that poor attack they still managed to win.
Yeah, they just couldn't do anything. I still didn't come onto Coutinho's performance. I'll do that a bit later in the podcast, but Coutinho wasn't doing all that flash either. So if the entire forward line is not doing well and Liverpool still managed to lose the game, it's a reflection, like you said, of how United really just couldn't assert themselves on the game at all. But credit where credit is due, Liverpool's back line was phenomenal all through the game. Absolutely phenomenal.
Completely agree. So,
yeah, that was, it was a bit of a shame that Johnson got injured towards the end. But even when Wisdom came on, he looked pretty decent, and he looked like he was still able to, soak up the pressure and keep a cool head. So, yeah. As far as Liverpool's substitutions goes, they were bang on the money. I couldn't say the same about United's substitutes.
We were talking briefly about how Jones got injured and how Rafael is already injured. With the transfer window closed, how do you think this will affect the future tactics choices of Moyes in the coming games? Zilch.
Well, I think most likely you'll see Valencia there, seeing as there really isn't anyone else. And I think what that might do is perhaps persuade Moyes to give some of the young players a bit more of a chance. Maybe Zaha, for example, might get on the ground, or what's his name, Lindegaard, might be able to have a few runs, I think, just to, even on the bench, just to make up the numbers. So in that regard, it might be interesting to see. Other than that, I think Valencia will do a bang-up job there. He's played right back plenty of times, and he's very good, so I don't see a huge disruption in their defence. I just think it might give a few more chances to the youngsters.
How about you, Magneto?
There is also Chris Smalling who's available, who sometimes plays, right back. He did that a few times for Fulham, I believe, here before. So, the main problem that I see for United is Ferdinand. I might get, quite a bit of flack for it, but I just don't see him as the same player that he was before. Where the replacement for Ferdinand is, who's going to step up into the spot? I mean, is it going to be Evans? Is it going to be, is it going to be Smalling who steps in, or Jones is going to be the new centre back?
I'd say it's Evans.
And Evans is a little bit, he picks up quite a few injuries as well. So it's a little surprising with United that they didn't really involve themselves a bit more than they did in the transfer window. But that's a different scenario altogether, I guess. They at least have Fellaini to boost their midfield, really faltering midfield a bit. So that will be a bit of a boost for them, the central midfield area. So, yeah, look, maybe that's what, Carrick is going to have a bit more support for him, or beside him with Fellaini. And maybe that's what Cleverly needs, a bit of competition to say, okay, I'm not just a one-shot kind of guy.
All right. What about you, 13Goals? What do you think about injuries at Manchester United?
Well, they're certainly piling up in one area of the pitch, and that appears to be the right back. I mean, like Mag said, they still have Chris Smalling there, who has played in right back before and played pretty well there. He played in a couple of Champions League games before he got injured. Although, to be fair, his injury record is pretty bad as well, Chris Smalling. Although I do rate him. The Ferdinand, he's still got it, in my opinion. I mean, you could see how the Man United fans were ranting and raving about how good he was last year. Especially with that tackle against Luis Suarez at Old Trafford.
Well, everyone loves that.
Alright, and now we shall move on to our man of the match and flop choices for both teams. Let's start off with Manchester United. What did you think, Zilch?
Well, flop, and I'm sure I won't get any flack from the United fellas. I have to say it's Young. He was just crap. One cross from 9, successful. I mean, that's really poor. Every time he got the ball, he just looked so hesitant. It was as if he looked down to make sure the ball was still there, looked up, and then by then he'd been closed down. For me, he was totally ineffective. In man of the match, well, again, I don't think any of them really played that well. I don't know, I would probably give it to Vidic or Carrick. I thought both of them had a half-decent game.
Who's your pick, 13Goals?
Well, I know Zilch may not get any flack for his choice, but I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for my choice. Mine is Danny Welbeck.
Yep, you are.
I mean, he wasn't moving around enough. To be fair, Van Persie wasn't really moving around enough as well. He wasn't making the runs, drawing defenders for space for Van Persie. He was hardly ever trying to help them back with the midfield. He just really didn't do well in that match at all, really. United man of the match, though, I'd probably give it to Carrick. He just seems to be such an undroppable part of their team now.
Who's your pick, Magneto, for Manchester United?
For Manchester United, I guess the worst player for me was Ashley Young.
Yeah.
And mentioned it, but there's one stat that really sticks out for me, and that in his starting position of the pitch, which is just, beside the central midfielders, he spent 33.85% of the time there. And that's just not on. You've got to beat the defender and got to move, and you've got to actually either cut inside and try and bring the defense closer, or you've got to try and, go wide and go around the defender and try and at least win, try and put some take-ons. He had 0 successful take-ons, by the way.
Yeah.
So, Johnson completely ate him up. He had 1 successful cross out of 9, which might have been mentioned.
I think Nani would have been a better choice. 74%
successful passes. That is terrible. That is absolutely terrible. I'm sorry, but that's not acceptable for, a starter for United. Just not on. For the best player, I'd agree again with Zilch. I'd say, I don't know, Zilch, what did you say? For me, it is Valencia. He just came on, and he came on as a right back, not his natural position. Even though he can play well there, he gave them an extra dimension. He worked his butt off. He ran forward and put in some good crosses. And the crosses were actually threatening. It wasn't like the crosses were just there. They came into good positions to try and feed the strikers who were making some decent runs after he came on. But until Valencia came, the attack was really one-dimensional. So I'd say he was pretty good along with Carrick. But my man of the match is him.
Alright, my picks. Well, the flop of the match for Manchester United for me was Robin van Persie. Apart from that flare-up with Gerrard, he did next to nothing. And if we compare it to last season, where he helped out the defense, dropped back, acted like a real central forward, this performance was absolutely horrible from him.
He also missed from 6 yards. Don't forget that.
Yeah, he missed, he had 2 chances, I think, and missed both, and he really didn't help his team. Like, he was just standing there waiting for service, and well, United couldn't get him the service, and he didn't drop back to help them out. As for my man of the match, for me it's Evra, and because he went through a transfer season where United have put in bids for left backs, and that mentally that might be, really bad for a football player, because, you're a starter left back and your team is actively looking for a replacement of you. And he came into this match, was industrious, he acted like as to show Moyes that don't get Baines, I'm still good at this position, and I have massive respect for that for him.
To be honest, he should get man of the match simply for putting up for Ashley Young in front of him for 63 minutes before they finally subbed him off. God.
Anyways, now we will move on to Liverpool's man of the match and flop choices. Now, let's go the other way. Let's start with Magneto.
Well, for me, the Liverpool's worst player this is going to be a bit of an unpopular choice, but Philippe Coutinho was really terrible for me. The problem with Philippe Coutinho is not his talent. He has bagloads of it, and he has the vision to pick up a good pass, and I'm not worried about him in the long run. But at the moment, this game, all he did was put the ball onto his right foot and try to take a defender on. That's all he tried to do. He did manage to get past the defender 3 out of 4 times. But then, all those times that he did manage to do that, he took a long shot and 0 out of 3 goal attempts. That's his one-dimensional play this time around.
Yeah.
And he didn't have any key passes, and his pass completion rate was 71%, only 17 successful passes. Again, this goes with what I said earlier, where, all the Liverpool's front line just couldn't pass the ball. They just didn't do it to each other. And it was like all of them tried to hog the limelight for some reason. He didn't even cross. There was 0 crossing attempts from him. And considering that he played a good 25-30% of the time out wide, in this particular game, he should have at least attempted more crosses. So, considering the fact that he had 0 crosses and no passes, it kind of shows that he just wasn't ready for this game, at least in that position. He looked a bit more comfortable once he moved back into the midfield area after a few substitutions, but until then he was completely out, and he just was really poor for me. The best player, on the other hand, for me, is Glenn Johnson. He really dominated play today for me. 6 out of 6 successful tackles. Like I mentioned, Ashley Young just couldn't get past him with no successful take-ons, while actually he took Ashley Young on once and actually went past him. So it kind of shows who's a better winger even. He also had a good 50% headed duels, which is not generally something that you expect from, a wing back. But he also had, it's like he did his interceptions, he did his defensive duties, and he also spent a lot of time up front and contributed to attack. And also when the defense, in the central defense, made a couple of mistakes, he made 2 vital clearances, which kind of saved them a couple of times. So for me, he's the man of the match.
Who's your pick, 13 goals?
Well, flop of the match, I'm going to have to give it to Iago Aspas. Even though he did get subbed off like halfway through the second half, it was just so ineffectual, both dropping back and going forward. He didn't seem to tackle well. He just seemed, as Zilch put it earlier, he seemed to be a small fish. There. No way, it's it.
Small fish in a big pond.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean, he just, Magneto also mentioned he looked almost relieved that he got subbed off. So it's just, he's definitely the flop of the match for me. Although the man of the match from the Liverpool perspective, I'm still going for Steven Gerrard. I mean, as a guy who's known for attacking and known for scoring worldies from like 60 yards out, he really helped out in the back and he stuck to his job. He didn't try and rush up the pitch when they got the ball back. He just slowly kept moving and stopping guys like Carrick and the rest of the middle from taking pot shots at Mignolet's goal.
Good points. Zilch, what did you think?
Well, they've made good points. With Coutinho, I would say, I think he's more of an attacking mid than a winger. So I think he was a little out of position. But yeah, he didn't have a very effective game compared to what he can do. I would give the flop though to Aspas. In his defence, he's young, and this match was way too big for him, and for that I blame the manager. Even though I know he's a bit short on options, I think it was the big mistake. And for that, yeah, I blame the manager on that one. But Aspas gets my flop of the match. And for man of the match, I have to say, if they played the same way they did at the start of the match for the remainder of it, I would probably give it to Gerrard as well. Sturridge also had a decent game. But after that 30-minute mark, they were so ineffective that for me, the back four was by far the stars for Liverpool, and out of those four, I would give it to Enrique, because I think he had a really industrious game down that wing, and yet he managed to peg back each time and basically halt Giggs every single time. So for me, the fact that Giggs got 1 out of 6 crosses in, and he's normally very effective, I put a lot of that down to the pressure that Enrique put on him. So that's my two picks: Enrique for man of the match and Aspas flop.
Good choices. Well, my flop of the match for Liverpool side is also Aspas, for the reasons mentioned by 13goals and Zilch. So I won't really delve into that. My man of the match was Gerrard. Steven Gerrard, to me, during the game, showed what it means to be the captain of Liverpool. And if Suarez was watching the game, he should really be ashamed of himself watching Steven Gerrard put in a performance like he had put in.
Strong words.
What do you guys think of both Liverpool's and United's start of the season? 13goals.
Well, Liverpool have had a really good start to the season with their new star man, Daniel Sturridge. Although I'd be a bit worried if he ever gets injured, because they'll lose a big dimension in their attack, because everything seems to be going through him at the moment. All the goals and just really seem to be pushing the team on to win games. Can't believe Chelsea let him go, to be honest. And then there's United, like with their weird, wonky transfers and their weird, wonky start to the season. Well, it's probably down to injuries and the fact that Moyes hasn't really pushed himself into that kind of role yet. He's still very new to the whole Man United. He's very green. He's a bit greenhorn playing at this level, since with Everton he never won a game against the supposed Big Four or whatever it is nowadays. He's moving on. I predict they'll do a lot better as the season goes on once Fellaini settles in and they get all their eggs in one basket. So I reckon they'll do alright.
How about you, Zilch? What did you make of the start of the season for both of these teams?
Well, I'll cover United first. They're feeling out their new manager. I think, yeah, sure, they've got injury problems and they've been in a transition, haven't they, really? They're almost moving through into having new established wingers, really. Every time I look at United over the years, I think that's the best winger team in the competition. It's what they do. They attack down the wings and they score goals. And last season, their defensive middle wasn't that great. They know that. They conceded far too many goals, but in saying that, they scored far too many goals as well. So if you can do it, why not? This season, though, what we're seeing is a lack of attacking impetus in the centre. Maybe that's because Rooney was out. But without that impetus, without those 3 to 4 goals a game, having that same weak defensive mid is going to be a problem. Now, I'm not saying Carrick is a weak defensive middle. I'm saying just in general, their defensive effort isn't good enough, and it's certainly not what we're used to seeing from Manchester United over the years. You know, the team that wins 2-0, 3-0, 1-0, and just holds on basically to their wins. It's not what we're used to seeing, and I think they really need to fix that to be as indomitable as they usually are. I think they're still a very big threat. I don't think you can ever rule Manchester United out as not being a threat. They really do need to fix that up, I think. With Liverpool, I'm going to get a little bit flack for this from the Liverpool fans, but so be it. They've had a fantastic start. 3 1-0 victories. That's awesome. That's great. But what I've seen in almost all their matches so far is, again, that the defensive middle, they are great high up the pitch when they play their pressing game. They're fantastic. But what I don't see is a proper shielding effort in front of the back four, which invites pressure. And United were able to take advantage of that. They just didn't manage to score. But we saw that basically in the second half of that game, United were camped out almost in the last, 30% of the pitch and just couldn't get through. That's wonderful. That's great for the back four. But against teams where they can create through the centre, I see Liverpool having problems. I mean, we saw it against Villa. We saw that Villa were able to create chances. Sure, they lost. But they were able to really worry Liverpool at times. And I think, again, they need to really fix that. And also, Gerrard isn't getting any younger. He showed just how vital he is to the team. The second he's out with, fatigue, injury, whatever, I think they'll struggle in the centre. I think Alberto was a good option. And Lever seems pretty good. But in general, I just think their defensive work in the midfield isn't quite good enough, isn't quite sharp enough. And you just have to wonder if they can sustain pressure for 90 minutes in order to keep that wonderful pressing game of theirs. So, I think they might struggle later on. I think they've had a fantastic start. They've got Suarez coming back, who in my opinion is probably the best target man in the league, and Suarez will enjoy playing Sturridge will enjoy playing off him. But for me, again, they just got to fix that defensive centre, and they've really got to try and figure out what they're going to do when Gerrard isn't available. Yeah, for me, both teams have issues they need to look at.
And now on to you, Magneto.
Well, with Liverpool's season so far, I won't really touch too much upon it. A lot has been mentioned. They've brought in a lot of good defensive signings, and they've not really strengthened too far up front. So I guess it shows that Rodgers is showing a bit of faith in the people that he's brought in. He's also counting on Suarez quite a bit. So I guess that's how we can expect them to go forward. They've had the best start in forever, so that's great for them. Still a little unsure as to how the season is going to pan out, but it'll be good figuring it out as it goes. As far as United goes, if you remember in the preview of the season that we did so far, I said that they would not really make it into the top 4 this season, and I feel they have yet to prove me wrong with regards to that. It's just not been United's kind of performances so far. They've been a little laggy. They've been a little, slow in their passing, a little slow in their wing play. They just miss something, and that is really, I feel it's really going to hurt them. And let's see if they can still prove me wrong. As far as it goes so far, I don't see any evidence of it.
Alright, with that we shall conclude our Manchester United versus Liverpool podcast. Thank you. I shall thank my guests, Maddie, Rob, 13goals, and Zilch. Thank you guys for listening to us. See you next time.
See ya.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.